First, we're going to be hearing from Mike Duke, presenting his talk um, that he has very creatively called "The Next One Will Always Be Better: A Memoir of My First Production Site." Um, Mike's an associate engineer at Granicus in downtown Denver. He's a Turing graduate, Turing alumnus, so that's cool. I think a lot of you may know him or know his name, since I think we have a bunch of Turing students or past students here. Um, Mike's been a professional developer for less than a year, so he's got that like fresh new look at like what is it like to go from not being a developer to shipping production sites. I think that's a really interesting thing that once you're past it by 3 or 4 years, you kind of forget what that's like. So I think I'm really excited to hear that talk. Mike is he's quarantining, so he enjoys long walks to his living room and frequent visits to lands that don't exist. Um, I think that we're gonna have a great time tonight. I'm really excited about the stuff we're gonna be hearing about. We do have a code of conduct. Sorry about that. We do have a code of conduct. If you haven't seen it yet, please do read that. It's on the meetup page. I'm gonna let somebody into the room. Um, I'm Thomas Randolph. I'll be emceeing tonight. I co-organized this with Nick Teets, Zach Brooks, and Gabe Greenfield, all on the call. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to any of us. Zach is our intrepid tech coordinator, which, as we've gone remote, has kind of been keeping the whole thing going. So that's been great. Thank you, everyone, for being here. I'm going to hand this off to Mike. Mike is a great guy. He's been coming to JAMStack for a long time. Mike, take it away.
Hello, everyone. I'm going to try and share my screen here real quick. All right, I think you should be seeing it now. Cool, I see thumbs up. So yeah, I'm Mike. I've been an associate software engineer at Granicus for about 9 months. Before that, I graduated from Turing. Anybody doesn't know what that is, just ask. I think most of us know. So I'm still pretty new to this career path, as I know a bunch of people are. So I wanted to share kind of the unique experience that I had in my first few months at my job and try to impart some of the lessons that I learned from it. Broken this down into like main subjects that I wanted to take away from this experience. Not just the things I wish I had known, but the things that I did right. Because there were definitely a ton of things I did wrong. Some of this might be strictly for my own catharsis, but I think there is also some useful information. So I started at Granicus in mid-August with a group of 6 other developers, most of us associate level, so most of us straight out of boot camp. At that time, the project I'm referring to was already started. The team had named it Youre, so it's little u, capital R record, which I think started as a joke and just kind of stuck. The elevator pitch is that it's a web portal for third parties like title companies to file real estate and uniform commercial code documents online, minimizing in-person traffic at county offices. The idea is that a user logs in, starts a batch of documents, each document representing something physical like a deed or a mortgage. They go through a series of forms and fill out information for parties, legal references, whatever, and then either upload an image of a document, or in some cases, our main application would take the data and annotate it onto a standard form. So the main application that my team works on is over 20 years old. And this original version of, or the original version of this web portal was a one-off implementation for this county who purchased the main application probably more than a decade ago. Typically, the job that we're doing right now is just upgrading existing customers to the newest version of our base software. And a lot of that has to do with dealing with the individualized implementations that were put into place forever ago. and trying to kind of bring them up to speed with the new, whatever the new version is. We realized as part of the upgrade for this particular county that our main application for a lot of these counties requires a hardware upgrade as well. That's how old a lot of this is like when we go to upgrade them, their existing hardware would no longer work. So all of that said, my first point is kind of having an idea of what you're walking into. So I joined the team in September, at which point they had some comps of what the site was supposed to look like. They knew that they were going to use some JWTs, and they had a pretty plucky, we'll deal with it as it comes up attitude. The one saving grace of the project is that they had decided to build it in React, which they chose specifically because they knew that the department was getting new juniors who knew some React, me included, but no one else on the team had any real experience with it. At that time, they were working on the project kind of as they had time, jumping off pretty often to deal with more pressing issues, putting out fires and that kind of thing. The rest of our stack for our base software is all C# and .NET, which I had zero experience with. So I was taking tickets for the React work pretty early, just so I had something that I felt like I was doing. And through that, by the time October rolled around, it was getting evident to me and one of the other engineers that I was working with that we really didn't know the extent of the existing site and like everything that it did. So I went in, I spent a couple days writing out a document that outlined everything that happened on the old site, which to this day is still in production, as best as I could. There was a lot of like, okay, I click X, Y happens, and I see Z. So then our PO took that document and rewrote the tickets in our Epic, and we ended up adding close to 150 points of new work. This is on a team that averaged at the time 8 to 10 points a sprint. So our deadline was in December. So this was in October that we figured this out. So the next thing is plan as much as you can. We started the project with the assumption that most of the people working on it were kind of known entities. And we had a pretty good of what they thought they had a pretty good idea of what the site needed to do. I'm sure I don't have to tell all of you that the best laid plans often go completely haywire, but the next couple of months were just a comedy of missing resources and crash courses. Our principal engineer, who was originally supposed to do all of the back-end work for the project, ended up completely indisposed on other issues. The engineer I was working really closely with on the front end left the company in early December. I was left to myself, and there was one other mid-level engineer who'd been hired after me to basically grind out this project as quick as we could. We had a very little outside input, and that was kind of, he was working on the back end, I was on the front end, that's what we did. As we were getting closer to that sort of December deadline, I was really starting to feel the pressure, because whatever plans we had made for the development of the site were just gone. They were out the window, and we were really flying by the seat of our pants. We were able to adjust expectations with the client based on the new scope, but they still wanted to see something around mid-December. So me, as a junior level developer, ended up running a demo for the app for our customer-facing team. Most of them I'd never spoken to. You know, I think I was learning 3 different new third-party libraries. I'm making design decisions on a website that I have no production experience, and I hadn't written a single test. So the real point here is that we could have had a better plan, obviously, but no amount of planning could have prepared us for some of the circumstances that arose. You know, my advice is do the diligence, take the time to plan, but when it goes sideways, which it will, make sure you're ready to handle it. The next point is communication is key. And I want to be clear, during all of this time, I wasn't lying or misrepresenting myself to anybody. This isn't one of those stories where no one tells anyone else anything and it's a big series of misunderstandings. I was telling everyone who would listen how completely out of depth I was. And communication was, in my humble opinion, the thing that ultimately saved the project. You may not know this about me, or I don't know, you may not be able to see on the video, but I am an older guy. I'm not far over 40, but I am over. I've had many jobs in my time, and I hadn't worked in the tech industry before, but the one thing that all of the jobs have in common is a need for better communication. Every endeavor in which more than one person tries to work in the same direction as another person could use better communication. Our daily stand-ups, our impromptu meetings, occasional code reviews, and constant communication on Slack, or even just, sliding over to the desk next to us, meant that the other engineer and I were in sync as much as we could have been given the circumstances. There were still moments where we'd end up with a naming conflict, or something silly like that. But I think we did a pretty good job. The next point is being flexible. So there's a word that carries a lot of baggage with it, but I think is still totally appropriate, and that's agile. Being agile. By the time the holidays were over, I found that a lot of the major front-end work was done. I still had a lot of polish to do, probably even more than I had anticipated, but the groundwork was laid. So to fill my time, I refactored, I QA tested my own work to find bugs or where UI could be improved. I did a little back-end work. I worked on the XML annotations that had to go with the site. I did whatever needed to be done in order to complete the project and make it as good as I could make it. We use the word agile a lot, and it means different things in different contexts. But for me, it means being willing to jump onto another task to cover what is necessary. It's something I've done my entire working career, and it's given me a lot of room to learn and improve where I might not have otherwise. Being agile to me also means being willing to do what it takes to get the job done the best way you can with the time frame that you have. So if I had it all to do over again, there are a ton of things I would change. I would build my own UI components for one, instead of relying on an open source library. I would have spent more time learning some of the other libraries we use instead of diving in face first and checking docs later. I would have taken a more TDD approach. I would have liked to gather more information about how people were using the existing site and what they wanted improved or changed. But all of those things take time, and it was time we didn't have. One of the big ones is keep up with the news, but don't let it get you down. Now, this is a blanket statement, and I think it applies to life in general right now. But talking about this context, I think it also applies. Yeah, I don't know about you guys, but I get at least one daily email that's packed full of articles with titles like 5 things you can do to write better React, or concepts to become a better React developer. So by the beginning of February, we were finally getting into QA and internal testing, and but my anxiety was really starting to get the better of me. I made a Slack post that first week of the month and said, "Do you guys ever read or have one of those moments where you read an article and it makes you want to rewrite your entire application?" I had read an article on validating forms with hooks, and it felt like I completely failed the whole project. I made the decision early on not to push the idea of using hooks because I'd never actually built anything that way. And I was the person on the team with the most React experience. So I turned it into a joke on Slack, and the rest of the team laughed with me. But it was really about me expressing a fear that a lot of us have, which they call imposter syndrome. I built the client side of a site, and to a degree, I was proud of it, but there was no one looking at my code and telling me I was doing it quote unquote right. No one was really checking my commits to ask, is this really the best way to do this? The only time I found out that I'd done something that didn't work was when I got a Slack message at 7 a.m. from our principal engineer saying that he ran a build of the site on our QA server and everything was broken. But in response to my anxious Slack message, the manager in charge of my team said something that will stick with me for the rest of my career. He said, "The shittiest thing shipped is infinitely better than the most perfect vaporware. Everything you ever ship is a stepping stone to the next thing you ship, and the next one will always be better." Of course, he's right. And ultimately, I've made something that I can talk about and show off and that real people will be using in their daily lives. And no, it's not perfect, but because I was there, it wasn't as late as it might have been. It might even have been a little bit better than it would have been. Heck, it might not have happened at all. So the next point is don't let go of the right way. Just let it go for now. So the first time I'd heard the term technical debt, it was in that kind of same tone of voice as you would talk about your cousin who went to AA. It happens, but we don't like to talk about it, and it's certainly not something we want to admit to. But the reality is, as I've learned over the course of the project, there's no way to build anything bigger than like an egg timer without accruing tech debt. The key, in my opinion, is to embrace it. I'm the kind of person who knows that if I don't write something down, when I think of it, it will be lost forever. So to that end, I started writing tickets for my own personal tech debt items pretty early in the process. Testing, prop types for all my components. I want to integrate a library for keyboard commands. I want to fix a couple of buttons that just don't look like I want them to. The point is that you might not be able to build a project the way you really want to because of time constraints or whatever. But that doesn't mean you should abandon what you really want to do with it. You know, keep a rainy day list and work on it as you can. And the last point is know why you're doing it and who you're doing it for. So I've mentioned that our users, I wish I knew our users better, which is part of what this means, but not all of it. I'm also talking about knowing why you are doing the work. Technically, I didn't have to work on Youre, not really. I could have asked to move to another team and let somebody else do the work, but I really wanted the experience of building a larger scale React app. And I made sure that I got to work with at least one or two libraries and technologies that I'd only heard about before. One of those was Formic, which I used to build all of our forms, which there are many on the site. At Granicus, one of our core values for the engineering department is being customer focused in everything we build, which is absolutely important. But I also don't think we need to keep in mind, but I also think we need to keep in mind that to some degree, everything we build for ourselves. On the one hand, that means thinking about the site as if you were a user. Is the focus in the right place when a modal opens so they don't have to take an extra second to click a field? Can they fill out a form without having to touch the mouse? Does all the text even make sense? On the other hand, it means remembering that you are there to level up your skills and to become better than you were when you started. If what you've written today is the same as what you wrote yesterday, are you doing anyone any favors, really? So in conclusion, we sent URecord to UAT the first week of March, and I took myself to a fancy lunch at Garden Grace to celebrate. We're in a weird holding pattern right now with getting it sent out to production because of the quarantine, and the county offices are on limited staff and they haven't had a ton of time to test it. But for what they've tested and what they've done with it, I haven't heard any complaints so far. Ultimately, what really mattered to me was the experience of working on a project like this and everything that I learned. For the last month and a half, I've been back on the day-to-day of chasing bugs in a 20-year-old legacy code base, mostly written in languages that I don't know. But while URecord wasn't a sexy piece of software or even all that interesting, it's an episode of my career that will always stay with me and be something that I can talk about as a time when I did my best and I made a thing. And I know that the next one will always be better. So thank you. I appreciate everybody listening. And
Awesome.
Feel free to ask any questions you might have.
Yeah, thank you, Mike. Yeah, if anybody has any questions, we'd love to hear them. Mike, that was great. I love hearing that perspective, because it's really easy to lose perspective as you move through your career. And having this documented somewhere, I wasn't a smart enough person to do this presentation when I was less than a year into my career. So was really awesome. Thank you. Does anybody have any questions for Mike about his experience or just general experience?
I had a quick one. First of all, truly fantastic talk. That was very entertaining, very insightful. So with the whole idea of make the next one better, you said you were back into kind of bug squashing most days. Do you want to do this all over again at company number 2 and 3 and 4 and start from the very beginning? Or are you, I don't know, what's your plan?
I don't know that I have a plan, really. I think I've got a few more months on the team that I'm on, and then I'm going to start looking for a new team within the same company, probably. I don't know. It's interesting because that's kind of the dream, is getting to build something fresh and new from the ground up. And in a lot of ways, it felt just like a big scale boot camp project. It was, but I don't know. It was also stressful in a way that, I would love to build something from the ground up and have the time to really do it right, I think is the answer. I'm fine with squashing bugs right now, and because I'm still licking my wounds from this experience a little bit. But yeah, it would be nice to do something like this with more time.
Cool, thanks.
AJ, go ahead.
Thank you. Hi, Mike. Turing represent. Woo. Thank you for your talk. That was wonderful. I really liked the quote you gave about vaporware being better than nowheres, like shipping something's better than shipping nothing. And I want to ask you about your early experiences going through the realization. You said that, nobody's really looking at your commit. They're not going to come up to you and say stuff about like, are you writing your code right? But they will say something when there's a production issue, like when what is deployed is not working. So my question is, when you were starting out, and I guess still you're early in your career, how did you approach production issues? Like, how did you approach communicating them? Obviously, like you're working in a brand new, like totally different tech stack than what you studied at like boot camp, and there are all these different seniors. You read the lay of the land when you got onto your project, and it had its own history. So when communication is key, how did you get around to investigating production issues that came up and communicating them to somebody who was like more senior to get around to solving them?
Sure. So fortunately, we have my team in particular has a very strange path to production. All of our software is actually installed on-prem with our customers. So we're not doing any kind of, it's not like a software as a service kind of model. So everything that I do gets deployed to QA first. So if something is going to break, it's going to break there, which is very nice because I have definitely broken things, and you know, it's a big deal, but it's not a very big deal. So for me, it's, we're not dealing with anything that has real time constraints, like really tight time constraints, because we're not deploying directly to production. So I have a little bit of time if something's broken to just kind of go through and troubleshoot it. But it's mostly just going back and looking at the tickets that I did for the last build and kind of seeing, okay, what was changed, what could have broken, what happened, and kind of going from there. My team has actually been really great. The seniors and the principal on my team are really awesome and have been willing to work with whatever I need to do to get things done. So that's also been a big part of it. Is we just, there's never been a moment where it's like, oh, you broke something, you fix it right now. It's like, okay, something happened. We need to kind of backtrack, figure it out, and again, it's a communication experience. It's talking it through, figuring out what happened, and fixing it as a team. So.
Excellent. Thanks, Mike. Nick, go ahead.
Mike, thank you so much for sharing your experience. I'm a big fan of the way that you communicate and tell stories. So really happy that you're here sharing this with us. I liked the anecdote about breaking your test environment. That's something that I did today, and I'm working on fixing. But you mentioned sometimes you're put in a situation where you have to play many different roles on the team. You have to do the QA testing. You have to do some of the pipeline stuff, like what have you. Every situation is different. What insight did you gain from doing something that wasn't like dev work?
I mean, I've always been the kind of person that I love the kind of small business mentality, where it's like I worked in a number of small businesses, and it's, no matter who you are, the bathroom still has to get cleaned and somebody's got to do it. So it's like, sometimes you just got to take one for the team and go clean the damn bathroom. So I think, one of the major things I've taken away from it is that I can figure out just about anything. If you give me enough time, and I can Google, anything can be figured out. Sometimes I have to ask questions. Sometimes I have to do some creative Googling, but it all comes out in the end. And it doesn't matter what language or what you're working on. It all has its similarities. Everything's got a loop. Everything's got object-oriented, or most everything's got object-oriented roots. So, it's all the same stuff. And, doing QA is just poking the thing until it breaks, which, I'm perfectly happy to do. So I think it's just jumping in and not being, not having that kind of ego where it's like, I'm only going to do this kind of work. It's like we do what we need to do.
Excellent. Thanks, Mike. Daniel, go ahead.
Hey, Mike. Yay, Turing. Really appreciate your vulnerability in the way that you told the story. It's really real, which I appreciate. I'm curious to hear more about what is it like being in an environment, leaving boot camp, and then making a product that is going to be in the hands of real people really soon. What was it like, the emotional experience of the pressure and expectations and all that?
Sure. To be honest, I'm so excited about it. I'm so excited to be making something that people are going to be using. I am absolutely so happy that there are like several levels of QA that are between me and the general public. So, we have our own internal QA guy on our team. We have our customer facing team that does several of their own tests and things. The customer has their own testing environment before anything ever goes to production. So there's several levels of that. So that takes a certain amount of that pressure away, knowing that there's going to be many other eyes on something before it ever gets out there. But one of the interesting things that actually kind of took me by surprise was how excited I am to have people messing around with it, and how this is one of the most, so far, and I'm only 9 months in, it's been one of the most fulfilling jobs I've ever had, just based on that thought of somebody's going to be literally doing this every day.
Cool. Thanks.
Mhm.
Excellent. Does anybody have any other questions for Mike? Okay. Thank you, Mike. That was excellent. I love hearing about this kind of stuff. That was fantastic.
Jeff there.
Who's here?
My brother.
Oh, hi, Jeff.
He's in Boston, so
You can tell you guys are brothers by the nice hardy beards.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so that was great, Mike. Thank you so much.